Alright, there we go. Everything good? I think so. Turn that off. I swear, Facebook is going to be my downfall. You get into one little discussion about anime and mangas and things like that, and then suddenly your entire morning loses its mind. And all of your time is just gone. And then you realize that you're late for the stream that you're supposed to be doing. And then, yeah, that happens. I should really just delete Facebook entirely. What am I doing with my life? Anyway, that's done. I think we are ready to go. So, why don't we go ahead and get this started? And so I can make this go away. And say hello! Shadowcat back, and today, today I'm getting myself in trouble. I'm gonna get myself in so much trouble. I'm gonna get myself in all the trouble. And there's not even anybody here. It's just me. This is me literally screaming into the void. Which is probably good if I ever wanted to have a channel after this, or ever have an audience after this, because, like, I look at my subscriber total, and it says 462. I know I lost 2 people last night. But I'm expecting, by the end of today, that number is going to go down to 231. Okay? That's what I'm expecting. 231 people by the time I get done today. So we will have to wait and see what happens there. But today, for some maybe lack of any better subject to talk about, at least anything that I really feel qualified to talk about, I figured I'm going to talk about all the things that I have steered clear of talking about in the past. And that is all the controversial topics, because there's some news that's come out lately. There's news internationally, there's news domestically, and I am not generally a news kind of channel. I mean, by and large, most of my stuff is gaming, but even my lectures tend to focus on ideas rather than, current events. That being said, though, there are some broader things to talk about when it comes to the current events of our day, and I want to talk about some of them. Now, when I titled this thing, I titled it Gun Control, Abortion, and Isreal, because those are the 3 things that I had planned. However, if somebody were to pop up in the chat and wanted to add something onto that burning dumpster fire of a subject, then, hey, I welcome it. If you want opinions, I've got opinions. I can throw something in there. So, if you pop up in the chat later, actually, it's not even going to matter, because if you're not here now to hear that, then you wouldn't be able to put something in the chat later. Kind of a flawed premise to begin with, actually. Anyway, why don't we just get into things, instead of wasting any more time. So, the first thing that I want to talk about today is going to be probably the least contentious of the things that happened. If you're in the US, you probably heard about it already. If you're not in the US, you may not have heard about it. However, there was a mass shooting that happened, what was it, 4 days ago now? 4 or 5 days ago now, I think it was. It is the first mass shooting to happen in the state of Maine, which, if I asked most people to point it out on a map, they would probably look at me like a monkey doing a math problem, because nobody knows where Maine is. Nobody knows what Maine is. Most people could not remember Maine if you actually gave them a map and asked them to fill it out. Then again, given the education standards in America right now, if you gave them a map and told them to fill it out, they probably couldn't even get half the states. Testament to our education system. What can you do? Well, okay, what you can do is make sure that you're educated. What can we do as a whole? I don't know. Kind of comes down to individual responsibility at this point. Anyway, though, if you don't know where Maine is a little, well, kind of little. It's like the biggest New England state, I think. But it's all the way north, all the way east in the upper right corner of what would be the US. I've heard it's very nice there. I've also heard it's very cold there, which means I'm never going there because I hate cold things. But they had a mass shooting the other day. It was, and I believe the guy has been found dead by the time I'm doing this video. I heard about it last night, but I heard it was a suspect that was found dead. I don't know if they were able to actually confirm anything. Either way, they know who did it. If they think they have the suspect, I'm sure they do. But the guy went through and he shot and killed 18 people, and I believe wounded about an equal number, with several of them, as far as I knew yesterday, still in critical condition. However, critical condition usually means they're going to pull through. Usually. I mean, things do still happen. So that's what happened. Bunch of people were shot, bunch of people were killed. And of course, as soon as this happened, and I guess I could go ahead and bring up the browser. Hold on. Bring up the browser. There it is. Okay. So, as soon as this happened, of course, there was all kinds of controversy over it. We want to know, was he mentally ill? Why'd he do it? And we haven't really been given a whole lot. What we do know about him is the guy was apparently an Army reservist. He was military trained or paramilitary trained. I'm not sure what his level of training was. Apparently he was a firearms instructor as well. So he knew what he was doing. And as for why he did it, I don't know that anyone knows. Something about bowling. He targeted a lot of bowling places. Not sure what's up with that. But as soon as this happened, there was, of course, all the usual discussions. There was discussions of mental health. There was discussions of things like red flag laws, and apparently Maine has something called a yellow flag law, which I'm not familiar with. Red flag laws generally are a green light for law enforcement to go through and confiscate firearms if somebody is deemed to be a danger to either themselves or others. I'm not sure what yellow flag laws are. Yeah, it says right here, fatally shot 18 people. So we're hearing a lot of the same arguments we've heard before, and of course at the top of that list is the subject of gun control. Now, this is nothing new. Every single time there is a shooting, there is the subject of gun control. Because they say, if only we had had tighter gun control laws. If only we had been able to do more. Or rather, if only people had been able to do less, then these things wouldn't have happened. I don't have a whole lot to say on this subject, because I do believe that, in two ways, it's rather an irrelevant subject. The first one is, of course, that when we discuss the idea of gun control, what we're really talking about is the banning of guns, okay? And I really think that we need to have a discussion on words. It's actually a lecture that I've kind of wanted to do for a while, but I never thought that I could stretch it out to be an entire lecture. And so maybe this is a good time to actually talk about this, because it's going to be relevant later on in this discussion as well. And that is the subject of words. I once heard somebody, I want to say it was James Lindsay, but I'm not sure that it was actually him that said it or if he was quoting somebody else. And James Lindsay is primarily, I believe, an anti-communist. That's kind of where his focus lies. And one of the things that he said is when you talk about us versus the communists, he said that we share the same vocabulary, but we do not share the same dictionary. And when I heard that, it kind of struck me because it was a terribly brilliant thing to say. It's one of the reasons why things like racism have all but lost their meaning and zeal. The reason being is that everyone knows what the word racism means, but what the word racism means changes depending on who you're asking. For example, if you were to ask anybody from, say, my generation, and I am a millennial, if you were to ask somebody from my generation prior. So we're talking millennials, at least I would say the majority of millennials. If you were to ask Gen Y, Gen X, if you were to ask the boomers, the greatest generation, there might be a couple in there that I'm missing, but if you were to ask most of them, what is racism? We would tell you that it is prejudice against somebody based upon their skin color, okay? Or just their race in general, not necessarily or limited to skin color, but based on who you are. White, black, Asian, Indian, Native American, Pacific Islander, Australian, whatever it is. It's wrong to judge people simply because of the way they were born. Because for a long time, that's what we were raised to believe. I'm kind of guessing, I think I was the last class, at least judging by where the world has gone, to be taught color blindness. Now, it's an interesting subject on its own because I'm going to assume that many people in my generation were taught color blindness when we were in school. We were taught that you should not see color. You should not see race. You should see people. Of course, if you talk to anyone who is from the later generations, many of them have been taught that color blindness is in fact racism now. And that's very interesting because the definition of racism has changed. It used to be any prejudice towards somebody based on their race. Now, racism has become prejudice plus power. In other words, it's not enough for you to have opinions on somebody based on their race, but if you have power over them, now it's racism. Of course, if we take the negative of this, that means that if you have a prejudice towards somebody based on their race, but you don't have power over them, well, then it's not really racism, is it? It's just a prejudice, and you're allowed to have a prejudice, right? I mean, you're allowed to think and feel the way you want to think, but it's not racism, not according to the new definition. Words matter. And so when we talk about gun control, we have to look at the words and the meanings we're using. Because anybody who's been involved in politics for longer than 5 minutes will know that politicians lie. Okay? Politicians always lie. Politicians have always lied, and they always will lie. Understanding that is pretty much the first thing that you need to learn before you can begin to learn anything else. So when we know that politicians lie, we can begin to understand better what they say. When they say that they want gun control, we can immediately question, number one, what exactly do you think you're controlling and what are you doing with that control? Well, when they say gun control, they never mean we would like to put guns in the hands of every person and then force people to go through a government-mandated safety course. Okay? They never mean that. They never mean we would like to actually put people through a bare minimum, what is boot camp? Is boot camp like 10 weeks? I don't know how long boot camp is. I have two sisters that went through boot camp. I don't actually remember how long it was. But they're not saying that we want to send people to boot camp so that they can, number one, pass a physical fitness test, and number two, get rifle and sidearm training. Okay, they never mean that they want to train people. No, when they say gun control, the only thing they ever mean is they want to take away guns. However, if they were to come out and simply say, you know what, we're pushing a bill that will abolish the ability to own firearms, okay? We are coming out and we want to actually pass an amendment to repeal the Second Amendment. They never do that. And the reason they never do that is because, well, that would be political suicide. After all, if you are in politics, then your entire goal is basically to stay in politics. Let's drop the pretense here. The idea of being a servant and representative of your constituents, that ended a long, long, long time ago when being a congressperson or, well, a representative or senator or judge or cabinet officer or whatever, whenever being in government became a profession. As soon as you could actually live off of working in government, the idea of representing anybody went out the window. Now it's all about how best can I enrich myself. I don't entirely blame them for that one. That is natural. That would be a bit like pouring an entire bag of dog food in front of a dog and then getting upset that the dog is overeating. No, you really can't get upset at the dog for that. After all, it's just in the dog's nature, and it's in our nature to seek greater wealth, greater resources, things like that. So they're not representing anybody, which means that they just seek power and control, and that means that they want to control everything that you can do. And that means if they want to ban firearms, well, then that's what they want to do. And nobody is going to actually come out and... The point was, nobody's actually going to come out and say that, because then people might not vote for them. So they have to put the greatest facade on it, no matter how thin the veneer is. They cannot just come out and say, we want to take all the guns. Now, mind you, some representatives actually have come out and said that. Most of them hold very little power at all, and most of them actually come from districts that are so polarized that their position was never really in any danger to begin with. They're in places where the only threat they could ever possibly face would be a primary threat. I'm talking like places like the entirety of California, where there's no Republican representation at all, just because the state is that captured. So we understand that when they say this, what they say is one thing, what they mean is another. When they say control, they mean ban. And now that we've had this mass shooting in Maine, there is once again the call to, and let's not use their words, ban firearms again. Now, in particular, right now, they're talking about just banning the AR-15 again. And that's all I've heard of so far. They want to get rid of these scary assault rifles, despite the fact that there is actually no such thing as an assault rifle. I am by far not a gun expert, but even I am knowledgeable enough to know that there is no such thing as an assault rifle. There are rifles of many kinds. There are bolt-action rifles, there are semi-automatic rifles, there are single-shot rifles, there are break-action rifles, there are rolling block rifles. There's many different kinds of rifles. There is no such thing as an assault rifle. What most people think of when they say assault rifle would be a select fire rifle, the kind of thing used by the actual military. Select fire rifles, whereas your normal rifle would only have a safety that you can turn on or off. A select fire rifle, and I don't have an example handy, has many different settings. They have a safety, where the gun cannot be fired. Semi-automatic, where one pull is one bullet. Many of them have a burst fire, where once you pull the trigger, it will actually fire several rounds, usually bursts of 3 or 4 rounds. Or if you go all the way to the other end, fully automatic, where you pull the trigger and it just fires. This is a select fire rifle. It is not an assault rifle, it is select fire. And, consequentially, it is also illegal. Under the National Firearms Act, which was passed by Clinton back in the 90s, if I remember everything correctly, everything that was automatic was just made blatantly illegal, along with a whole bunch of other guns. And so, once all that was done, now you need to get a tax stamp for the guns you already had, which was interesting because it was one of the first times where we took people who already had firearms, who already had property, and if you remember the last lecture, we talked a lot about property, where we took people who already had property and then made them criminals for owning that property. After the fact. I mean, this is no different than if, say, they were to outlaw the color blue, and you just happen to own a blue shirt. Well, if the cops were to see you wearing that blue shirt, you could then be arrested. Or if they got a warrant to search your house and they found it in your closet, they could say, "What are you doing with this? Didn't you know that blue was outlawed?" It may seem like a ridiculous example, but it's really not, because when they made fully automatic weapons illegal, fully automatic firearms I should say, well, then, if you were caught with it down at the gun range, or if somebody knew about it and they called the police and the police had a search warrant, they could say, "Didn't you know this was illegal?" And then you're a criminal now. Now you're a felon for possessing an illegal firearm, which then gives them the ability to seize all of your firearms, because felons aren't allowed to own firearms. It's very interesting because what I want to talk about here is basically how they want to ban the Second Amendment, and they've already stripped the Second Amendment so very far that stripping the Second Amendment now, or at least, repealing it, much like we did the Constitutional Amendment on Prohibition, would almost do nothing at all, because you're only allowed to have a certain very specific subset of firearms already. And if we were to take those away, well, they've already got a head start on it. And so, like I said at the beginning here, there's many links here, and I couldn't find just one that I was happy with, so I just left it on this page. There's many articles here talking about how in the wake of the main shooting, there is talks again for gun control. Now, a few things about this. Number one, it's illegal. Now, I say this despite the fact that it's already been done. You cannot ban firearms under the Second Amendment, but they already have. So in a way, this is a completely moot point that I'm talking about. I acknowledge that. There's only so much that I can do. The fact is, under the actual language of the Second Amendment, and we have gone through that before on this channel, it says very clearly, "shall not be infringed." Now, people can argue over the wording and who it applies to. As far as I'm concerned, though, it says Congress shall make no law, and that the right to bear arms shall not be infringed. That means any arms. That means that if you want to carry a sword, you should be able to carry a sword. Swords are arms. They always have been. And any law that bars you from being able to carry a sword with you, to own it, and to do what you want with it, so long as it does not infringe upon somebody else's rights of life and liberty and property, you should be able to do what you want with it. The same thing, of course, applies to firearms as well. It applies to cannons, catapults, trebuchets, battering rams, tanks, jeeps, artillery pieces, fighter jets, and Because Tim Pool is so fond of making the argument, yes, nuclear weapons. Which is to say, if you can afford a multi-billion-dollar nuclear warhead, I fully believe in your right to have a nuclear warhead. I don't know what you're going to do with it. Maybe make a coffee table out of it. But yes, I fully believe in your right to own it. It is your right. And the reason why it is your right goes back to what we discussed last week when we were talking about life, liberty, property, and the pursuit of happiness. The fact is, you have the right to life, just like every other animal in the world does. And there is nobody attempting to pass a law to say that rabbits are not allowed to use claws in a fight. Rabbits have claws, wolves have teeth, raptors have talons, many animals have spines, some animals have venom, some have poison. Which, by the way, venoms and poisons are also illegal. You can be arrested simply for possessing certain toxic agents. These are things that are natural in wildlife, but as soon as you possess them, you are a criminal. And this is actually true for a lot of things. For example, I want to say opium, which, if I remember my pharmacology right, opium is derived from the poppy. And poppy is illegal to a certain extent. I do believe you can have a poppy plant, a poppy flower, but I do believe it is heavily regulated. Something that I don't have to speculate on, of course, would be marijuana. It is illegal to own a marijuana plant of any size in many states. In slightly fewer states, you can own a marijuana plant, but it can only be of a certain size, and it cannot be cultivated for use as a drug. Fewer still states will allow you to have marijuana plants, and you can use them for, recreational purposes. However, you can only have plants that go no larger than a certain size, and you can only have a certain number of them because they don't want you to distribute. And the number of places that will actually allow you to have as many plants as you want are very, very few, bordering on almost none. I believe Colorado has no limits on that. I believe Alaska has no limits on that. I'm not sure about California, but it would not surprise me if California also had no limits. It is a plant. It grows in nature. It had to come from somewhere, which means that it was here before we were. So many of these things are made illegal for no other reason than to simply try and control what you do, because somebody wants to control what you can do. Hey, JP's in the chat. Hello, JP. Did you bring your helmet? I left helmets in the Discord server. I hope you brought a helmet. And so we find that all of these laws really just have one purpose, and that is to infringe upon your rights to life, liberty, property, and the pursuit of happiness. When we talk about controlling firearms, or controlling any arms whatsoever, whether that be firearms, or bows and arrows, swords, knives, whatever it happens to be, this is, in fact, a direct infringement upon your right to life, liberty, and property, because it is taking away the avenues you have to defend your life, liberty, and property. And if you cannot defend your life, liberty, and property, then you don't have a right to it. You can make the argument to say, well, you can still fight for it. This is true. However, what if you are in a position where you have your life, your liberty, and your property, and you are a law-abiding citizen, and you are then faced with somebody who does not respect your right to life, liberty, and property, and also do not respect the laws that bar them from owning certain firearms? We've seen this play out many, many times, not just across the US, not just across Canada, not just across North America, but across the entire world. Criminals will always use whatever tools they can get their hands on to achieve their ends. And if you, the law-abiding citizen, do abide by the laws, then you put yourself sometimes at a disadvantage, sometimes at no advantage, and sometimes you're simply dead. And so we can see how when we discuss gun control in any regard, it is a direct infringement upon life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, property, all of that. I see that Malachi's in the chat. Hello, Malachi. Just chilling too, currently mining on Eve. All I can say is watch your back and stay in high sec. That's literally the best I can say. Good luck to you, man. You're braver than I am. But the only thing I'm going mining in is Minecraft. And even then, I'm watching my back for creepers. So, anyway. After the main shooting, we have more and more people that are calling for gun control again. Now, this is predictable. We see this every time there is a shooting somewhere. However, just because we hear about it again does not mean that anything has changed. As I just explained, there is a philosophical reason why we do not want to have these things, even though people are calling for it, anyway. However, the people that are calling for it, as I pointed out with the criminal example, do not care about your life, your property, your liberty. They don't. It's been pointed out many times, and I'm going to point out again here, that interestingly enough, all of these people who call for the banning of firearms, whether they want a particular firearm ban like the AR-15, or they simply want them all banned and the Second Amendment repealed, all of them have high security. If they work for the government in some respect, they have Secret Service protection, or they have police protection. If they don't have that, they have personal bodyguards, or private security. These people live in gated communities, and they are generally further gated off by having walls around their house and gates. These are people who are not subject to the same laws that you and I are, and thus they're not bothered when the liberties for citizens are repealed. They are not citizens. In the most practical statement, they are above the citizens. And it's because of that they really have no compunctions about doing it. They don't care. And that is the biggest reason why they should not be listened to. But unfortunately, they have power. And so this discussion will continue. Now, obviously, since today's entire stream is pretty much just me giving my opinions on things, you know where I stand on this one. I've been very clear in many different live streams how I feel about your right to self-defense, your right to the Second Amendment, and your right to whatever you want. If you want to train grizzly bears to be your personal protectors, I fully believe in your right to train grizzly bears. Now, that being said, I also fully believe in personal responsibility. Which means that if you decide to train grizzly bears, and one of your grizzly bears mauls someone unjustly, I do believe that you should face the full consequences of that, which in this case would be, at a minimum, manslaughter, possibly murder. Maybe murder in the third degree, but murder nonetheless. I am a big proponent of personal responsibility, that if you pull the trigger on your firearm and anybody and anybody gets hurt by that bullet. Like maybe you actually are at home and somebody breaks into your house. Maybe you grab your gun to defend yourself, okay? And because any good owner of a firearm, and anybody who is trained in the least amount, knows that if you are going to pull the trigger on your firearm, you continue to pull the trigger until the gun goes click. Okay? You are given a whole magazine. Use the whole magazine. But if one of those bullets misses and your neighbor is shot by it, I do believe that you are responsible for that. And that does mean that, yes, you could have your home invaded. You could defend your home, and you could still go to prison. However, you would not be going to prison for defending your home against an invader. And that's the difference. I'm actually of the same opinion when it comes to drugs. It's not terribly relevant to this subject, but since we are on the subject of controlling property, and drugs are technically property, as is your own body, my opinion on drugs is simply legalize all the drugs. I would then ban Narcan. Specifically because I do not believe that you should, or that drugs should be banned. Okay? I really don't. I never have. Now, me personally, I'm a teetotaler. I don't do drugs, obviously. I don't even drink. I have a drink maybe once a year, maybe once every couple of years. If I think really hard to this year, and this is the end of October, I don't think I have had a single drink this year. And I'm not bothered by that. I'm not sad by that. I don't lament it. The fact is, I just don't like to drink. I haven't yet found anything that I like. Alcohol tends to be an acquired taste, and I have no interest in acquiring a taste for anything. I think if you're going to like something, you should just like it. So I am actually of the opinion to let people have all the drugs they want. However, I am not of the opinion that we should be saving people from their stupid mistakes. If somebody wants to pull a Scarface, load up an entire desk full of cocaine, and then dive nose first into it, I'm sorry, it may sound heartless, but I am not on the side of saving that person. I will admit that there are times when we should save people from their stupid mistakes. For example, here's one. Here's a really good one. I can remember a case because I used to live, well, actually, technically, I still do live in off-road country. And so there's all kinds of ATVs and things like that. And I remember a story where there was somebody who was riding an ATV. And he was going down a trail, a road, something like that. And because it was a nice flat trail, he's going pretty fast. There was a wire that was strung across the road. And I'm sure you can see where this is going. Now, the wire, which I guess was supposed to be like a gate or something, just something to stop people from going through, should have had a flag on it. And I believe that there was a flag for it. It had just fallen off due to age and degradation. Because it wasn't flagged, the rider never saw it, and it nearly decapitated him. Now, of course, if you're going to take your quad out and you're going to be jumping over boulders and everything, are you taking some risks? Yes. Was this his fault? No. Should we try to save him? Yes. And for that matter, even if it wasn't because of that kind of accident, and by the way, the guy that had the wire across there, yeah, he was prosecuted for that. I do believe that driver died. I do believe that he was held up on manslaughter charges. I don't know how it ended, though. But if somebody goes out rock climbing or mountain biking or whatever and they get hurt, am I saying that we should not send people out there to save them? No. There's a big difference between taking a risk and having an accident and doing something that could be intentionally just lethal. I look at drug overdoses in the category of intentionally harmful. You don't just like have... I mean, technically, I suppose you could have an accident with drugs. It's like, well, I didn't mean to use that much. Yeah, that could be an argument that you could make. However, I don't believe in saving people from that. I don't. And that may be one of my more unpopular opinions today, but like I said, I fully expected to go from 462 subscribers down to 231. So if that number starts going down, I kind of feel like I'm doing something right. So, yeah, that's my stance on drugs. And when it comes to guns, you're responsible for whatever happens with that gun. Whether you shoot what you're aiming at, if you shoot somebody else, if you shoot yourself, you are responsible for whatever happens with that gun. It is an intentionally dangerous thing, and if you are not absolutely sure what you're doing with it, then you should be held responsible for those consequences. But that doesn't mean that it's on somebody else to control your choices. It's not on somebody else to say what you can or can't do just in case you might do something dangerous. And so that's why I think this really relates back to, life, liberty, property. Your property, no one should be able to tell you what you can do with it. At the same time, though, you also should not expect to be bailed out by somebody else using their property. Just like they don't have access to yours, you shouldn't have access to theirs. And I suppose by extension, that does mean that I'm actually kind of arguing for-profit hospitals, which we kind of already have, but yeah, I kind of am. You are not entitled to the hospital. You are not entitled to the doctor. You are not entitled to the medicine. If it's given to you, it's given to you out of grace and humility, and it should be accepted with gratitude and humility. Of course, gratitude, grace, and humility are three things that we don't really see a whole lot in today's day and age. So maybe that's where we got to start. Maybe if we started with a little bit of those three things, the rest might follow. Who knows? Anyway, let's see. JP says, don't touch my guns, don't touch my plants, stay out of my pocket. Hell yeah. You go, brother. Alright, so let's move on then. That's enough about guns. Instead, let's talk about something else controversial. Let's talk about abortion. Okay? Because that's going to send somebody's hair on end. Speaking of life, liberty, property, the pursuit of happiness, when it comes to the idea of abortion, and by the way, this is going to be another one of those cases where we talk about having one vocabulary but two dictionaries. Because when we talk about abortion, we generally talk about two sides. We talk about the pro-choice side, and we talk about the pro-life side. And interestingly, while I said that, James Lindsay was the one who gave me the idea of, one vocabulary but two dictionaries, it was actually Penn and Teller that I saw a long, long time ago when they were doing a TV show called Bullshit. And it was literally a show where they would do nothing but debunk all kinds of different claims. It's a really good show. I heard that it went on for a lot longer than I actually got to watch it. I don't think it's still going anymore. It's probably not. I don't even know what they're doing anymore. Are Penn and Teller still doing things anymore? I don't know. At any rate, they talked about the abortion debate way, way back then. And it's only grown more contentious since then. But one of the things that they said that I found was really, really interesting is that when they said, pro-choice versus pro-life, they said we're all pro-life, okay? We're all pro-life people. We all are. I mean, there is not a single person who's going to come out and say that life is not good. Except, I would argue, places like the human extinction group. Those people literally think that human life is a disease upon the planet. And it's their job, or their quest, to eliminate as many people from the planet as they can. So, discounting them, we all agree that life is pretty good. The argument isn't whether you're pro-life. The argument is whether you are pro or anti-abortion. And you can have whatever reasons you want there. But that's the argument. But again, this is one of those cases where we use vocabulary, we use words to dress things up, because if we were to call the thing what it is, it doesn't sound as nice. Nobody is coming out and saying straight up, I am pro-abortion. No one is doing that. They will say, I'm pro-choice, or I'm pro-women's rights, or I'm pro a lot of things, I'm just not pro-abortion. Okay? Nobody wants to be looked at that way. And why not? Well, because on a certain level, I think that all people, even those people who are pro-abortion, recognize that their position is tenuous at best, and they realize that there are inherent problems with it. Now, for my part, I am unabashedly pro-life. And I'm not religious. So it's not because of that. Most people who are pro-life do tend to be religious. They tend to see life as being something holy, something divine, something sacred, and thus it should be both a sin and a crime to destroy that thing. And I'm not going to argue with them. I have described myself in the past as a Christian atheist, but I'm an atheist through and through. I call myself a Christian atheist because I do believe that the Bible gives us a good way to live. That the stories and lessons in the Bible are valuable, and that there is a place for the church in society. That being said, I do not believe in God. I do not believe in Jesus. I do not believe in any miracles. I don't believe in any of that. And at this point, there's nothing that's going to change my mind. Not unless Jesus Christ actually shows up in Isreal, which, given the way things are going right now, and we'll get to that later, might happen. But we'll talk about that when we get to it. No. I am an atheist, and as such, I tend to put my faith more in science than I do God. And so when I look at the abortion debate, the biggest argument for abortion is my body, my rights. And that's a very, very interesting argument to make. My body, my rights. Because it is the woman who gets pregnant. It is the woman who has to carry the baby to term. It is her body that is being changed and used. It is her body. But is it? It is true that it is her body, but what about the body that's inside the body? See, this is where I have a contentious breakdown with the entire thing, because on the surface, I actually do agree. It is her body. She's allowed to do whatever she wants with it. She was allowed to sleep with people to become pregnant, and theoretically, she should be allowed to do whatever she wants to become unpregnant, yes? Well, no. And for that, I'm going to have to take you back to high school biology. So, I need you to take your helmets off and swap them for... Well, I guess students don't really wear hats, do they? They do in Japan. That's only like elementary school students. I take it back. Never mind. Leave the helmets on. All right, we're going back to school, though. So I'm going to pull up Wikipedia here, close out the banner, and we're going to talk about sexual reproduction. Now, according to YouTube's terms of service, you must be an adult to have an account to be on YouTube. Ergo, I don't need any of your permission slips to have this discussion, okay? No permission slips needed. You're not getting out of this class. All right, so when we talk biology, we talk about reproduction. There are two types of reproduction. There is sexual reproduction and there is asexual reproduction. Asexual reproduction, to make it very, very simple, is basically cloning, where you will literally have a cell which will divide into two, and then those two will divide into full beings on their own, okay? Asexual reproduction. Basically, instead of a gamete with only half of the genes it needs, it'll have the whole genes it needs, and there you go. Another word for it is parthenogenesis. But that is asexual reproduction. But we're not talking about that today, because humans are sexual creatures. And I probably didn't need to tell you that, but surprise! Now, when we talk about sexual creatures, that means that a sexual creature cannot reproduce on its own, to the great relief of every female out there. Otherwise, life would be rough. Instead, we are sexual creatures, which means that we need to pair up in order to make a new one of us. Thank you, loud motorcycle. That was just what I needed in the middle of my stream. Because of that, we have very, very particular gametes when it comes to reproduction. It doesn't really matter which gamete you happen to carry, whether it is sperm or egg. On the outside, they're different. On the inside, they're the same. That being, they only carry half of a genetic code. If you know anything about DNA and genetics, you know that all chromosomes come in pairs, or at least they're supposed to come in pairs. If they don't come in pairs, that's a different discussion. But every chromosome is supposed to come in pairs. And what happens is when the gametes are created, you take one full cell. Then you split that cell in two through a process called meiosis. This is different from mitosis because during meiosis, they do not replicate the other half of the genetic material. The reason being, we need to have two gametes. And we're going to pair them up with the opposite gamete, put them back together like Lego, and we're going to make something else. So you got your gametes, then you put your gametes together. I'm not going to explain how that happens. If you don't know, have fun figuring it out on your own. But you put your two gametes together, they combine, and all of those chromosomes get matched back up. This is one of the reasons why, and this is, a minor tangent to the side, but this is one of the reasons why only some animals can reproduce with other animals. Why is it that you can breed two dogs together, or you can breed two cows or two horses together, but you can't breed, say, a snake and a dolphin? Okay? Why can't you do that? Why can't you make yourself a snulfin? Well, the reason is because when you put the two gametes together, they have to match up again to make a full genetic code. And the number of genes that a dolphin has and the number of genes a snake has are different. They don't line up. It's kind of like having a zipper, except each side is a different length. They don't line up. So, you get your two gametes together and they zip themselves up together and they make one full genetic code. Now, here's where the my body, my choice argument falls apart. Because the female, of course, has her own genetic code. And when she had eggs, one of those eggs had exactly half of her genetic code. Then, when the male came through and added his genetic code, the other half of his genetic code zipped up with half of hers and made an entirely unique genetic sequence. This is the reason why DNA testing can be used to determine parentage. Because for somebody with enough skill and enough experience in studying genetic markers, you can take a sample from the mother, a sample from the father, and a sample from the offspring, and you can find out which genetic markers came from each parent. And once you have attributed for each one of the genetic markers, if you can trace every single one of the offspring's genetic markers to one or the other of the parents, you have a paternal match. So if you've ever watched like Parent Court or whatever it is, where they go through and they determine who is or is not the father, that's how they do that. However, they need both the mother and father for that, because the offspring is a combination of both of those, and it is completely unique. So when we discuss the idea of my body and my choice, well, it is true to an extent, because as soon as fertilization happens, it is no longer your body. It is a completely unique individual. And not only that, because like I said, when you hear this argument, it's usually coming from the religious side, who will say, you know, the soul is divine, the soul is present upon conception, and all of these things. I have a better argument. And for that, we need to go a little bit more into biology. Because when this happens, two things then happen in sequence. Number one, once fertilization has happened, the now fertilized egg travels into the uterus and it implants itself into the uterine wall. That's the first thing that happens. The second thing to happen, though, is at the point of implantation, an organ will be created called the placenta. Now, the placenta, as it says here, is a temporary embryonic and later fetal organ that begins developing from the blastocyst shortly after implantation. Plays critical roles in facilitating nutrient, gas, and waste exchange between the physically separate maternal and fetal circulations, and is an important endocrine organ, producing hormones that regulate both maternal and fetal physiology during pregnancy, okay? But right here is what I need to really focus on. Physically separate. Because it means this in more ways than you would think. One of the things that we still struggle with today is transplants. That is to say, if you needed to get a transplant, if you needed a heart, a lung, a liver, a kidney, whatever you needed, if you need a transplant, one of the things that we have, or that we struggle with, is rejection. Because our bodies are finely tuned machines. We know what we are. We know what we are not. And so this ability to implant something into us goes completely contrary to everything that we have been built to do. This is the reason why we have an immune system, and the reason why our immune system is actually pretty amazing. We have an adaptive immune system that is capable of doing many things, all the way from identifying a threat to our body, to learning that threat to our body, identifying it, and then countering it. Whether that be by antibodies or the various cells in the immune system. I was going to say, let's see, what would the white cells be? I don't remember what the white cells are. Crap, now I'm gonna have to go back and review pretty much all of my anatomy and physiology. Wow, I feel dumb now. Either way, all the various cells that are involved in the immune system, they will go out and they will kill anything that does not belong here. JP says, lol, my finely tuned machine needs maintenance. Yeah, don't we all? Anyway. So when you want to implant something, the first thing your body is going to do is it's going to say, you just stuck a massive piece of meat in me that does not belong here. I'm gonna kill it. And it's our job to say, no, you don't. And that's why we use all kinds of various types of immunosuppressants and therapies to try and lessen the body's reaction to having this foreign piece of meat stuffed into it. Because the last thing you want is to get a kidney transplant and then have the body not just reject, but kill the kidney. Which is what the body will do if you do not suppress the immune system and get the body to accept the transplant. And I'll be honest with you, I'm still not entirely certain how that works. I'm not certain that the body ever truly does accept a transplant. I know that, people can get them. I know someone personally who had a bone marrow transplant, and she had a bone marrow transplant at like 60 years old, and she's still kicking. Well, okay, not so kicking a whole lot anymore, but she could kick. She could do it. So we can make these things work. And the fact is that when we talk about things like the placenta, the reason why the placenta is there is manyfold, but one of the jobs that it does is it manages the interface between the developing fetus and the rest of the body. The reason being is because the fetus does have a completely different genetic code. It is possible, and it has happened often, that the mother's body realizes that there is a baby in there and that baby is different, that the mother's own immune system can attack the fetus through the placenta and the umbilical cord and kill it. Now, there are various different things that can happen here, or that can happen here, but here's a really interesting one that I thought of. And that is RH incompatibility during pregnancy. Now, I don't want to read this entire thing just because it's kind of hard to read and kind of bright too. Actually, I can change that. Boop. That's a fun button. By the way, if you want this browser extension, it is simply called High Contrast. And it will just invert the colors for you. It's a great extension. So, RH incompatibility during pregnancy. If you don't know what RH is, when somebody talks about blood types, RH is one of the things that goes into your blood types. It's not all of them, but it's one of them. And it's a very important one. It says... oh, hey. Hi, Tux. Tux says, hi. I swore I looked for this stream minutes ago and didn't find it. I'm not blaming YouTube yet. Oh no, you should absolutely blame YouTube, because today we are talking about all the things, okay? All of them. You already missed the discussion on gun control, and I talked about drug control while we were at it. Now we're talking about abortion. Trust me, YouTube is going to bury this stream so hard. that they're going to find it in China. And then they're going to ban it there too. So by the way, I don't usually start with this, but if you haven't done so already, do subscribe to the channel. Like I said, I'm expecting to lose people over this stream. So if you want to help counter that, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. More importantly though, share this video because YouTube is going to bury it. And I do not have the audience yet to overcome that. So help me out here. I'm gonna need it. And yes, as JP says, remember to like the stream. I liked it. I feel like I'm obligated to like it though, because if I don't like it, then I mean, what am I doing? Anyway though, RH. So, what is RH factor? An RH factor is a protein found on some red blood cells, abbreviated RBCs. Not everyone carries this protein, although most do. They are Rh positive, those who don't are Rh negative. Pretty simple. What, however, if parents don't have the same Rh factor? When a mother-to-be and father-to-be are not both positive or negative, it's called an Rh incompatibility. Now, one of the reasons why you have to have your blood tested if you're going to get a transfusion is for things like this. There is a symptom called blood poisoning. It's not something we come up against too much here, and I think that there was another name for it. Either I don't remember if blood poisoning is the old term or the new term. I think blood poisoning might be the old term. But if you get blood that does not match your type, your blood can literally destroy itself, which is really bad if you're already low on blood and need a transfusion. And now not only are you less on the whole blood front, but you have a whole lot of this septic blood circulating through your body. It's bad is what I'm saying. Ooh, I need a drink though. Okay, so, for example, if a woman who is Rh negative and a man who's Rh positive conceive a baby, the fetus may have Rh positive blood inherited from the father. About half of the children born to an Rh negative and Rh positive mother will be Rh positive. Rh incompatibility usually isn't a problem if it's a mother's first pregnancy. That's because the baby's blood does not normally enter the mother's circulatory system during the pregnancy. An interesting way to think about this is... Actually, it's I don't want to get too far into the actual biology here. But imagine a screen, okay? A screen like you would see on your screen door, okay? That screen is a barrier. If you are on the inside and you've got a friend on the outside, you can both put your hand on the screen. You can both feel each other through the screen, but you can't really touch each other through the screen. However, what if you, say, had some Jell-O, okay? So you got food, you got Jell-O, and you want to give your friend the Jell-O, but you can't open the door. You could push the Jell-O through the screen, and then your friend can take the Jell-O afterwards. Then you'll have to clean the screen. But still, you can do that. And that's kind of what the placenta does. The placenta will facilitate the transfer of oxygen and nutrition. But the blood doesn't actually touch. Okay, there is no mixing of blood that's supposed to happen there. For just this reason. It's also supposed to keep out things like infection. It'll transfer things like antibodies through. However, the placenta will not allow things like bacteria or viruses through. Tuck says, you've done that Jello thing in D&D, haven't you? No, actually I have not done that one, but I have other stories that are similar to that. That's not for today, though. That's for tomorrow. You want to hear the story of that? Come back tomorrow. We'll have fun with that. But anyway, the blood never touches. And the reason why the blood never touches is because of things like this. If there is a blood difference, and this is just talking about Rh factor. This isn't talking about all the other parts of your blood type. If the mother is AB, it is entirely possible for the fetus to be type O, which makes them incompatible. At least in one way, and I forget which way that is. I think O is the universal donor. Or maybe O is the universal recipient. I don't remember. Doesn't matter. It's possible for them to have different blood types. But this is the reason why they don't mix. And this is, consequently, the reason why I do not believe in the idea of it being my body, my choice. Because when we talk about the subject of abortion, yes, it is true, the mother's body is the mother's body. But when we talk about the idea of abortion, well, now you're not talking about the mother's body, you're talking about removing the fetus. This is a medical procedure that specifically targets somebody who is not the mother's body. Yes, it is true, you have to go through the mother's body to get to it. Oh, and Malachi corrected me. Thank you for that. O is donor specific, O negative, AB plus is the universal recipient. Okay, I'll be honest with you. I don't actually know what my own blood type is. I've never had my blood typed, as far as I know. I don't like needles. I have to go in and get blood work done. I've needed to go get blood work done for a long time ago, but like, I don't like needles. I haven't even got vaccinations in like 10 years. More than that, actually. Because the last time I got a vaccination, it was when I was still living in Michigan, and that was before I lived in Texas, and now I'm in Pennsylvania. So, it's been a long time. I don't like needles. So, yeah. That hasn't happened. So, yeah. Back to the abortion thing. And Tuck says lots of O. Well, O is the most common blood type. I know that much. I might not remember exactly what each one of them is, but I do remember that O is the most common. So yes, when we're talking about abortion, the fetus is not the mother's body. And we can specifically say this because the mother's body would kill it. In a literal heartbeat. And it has happened. As it says right down here, Rh negative pregnant women can be exposed to Rh protein that might cause antibody production other ways too. These include blood transfusions, miscarriage, and ectopic pregnancy. Okay, so when is the baby at risk? This is very interesting. Rh antibodies are harmless until the mother's second or later pregnancies. If she's carrying another Rh positive child, her Rh antibodies will recognize the Rh proteins on the surface of the baby's blood cells as foreign. Her antibodies will pass into the baby's bloodstream and attack those cells. Okay? That is a very important part right there. I did tell you, the placental barrier will allow oxygen through, it will allow nutrition through, and it will allow antibodies through. As such, if the mother is generating anti-Rh positive antibodies, she will kill the baby. Not intentionally, obviously, but she will kill the baby. And this is only one of several different syndromes that will cause the mother's body to do this. It is not her body. And this is pretty much the entire crux for my being pro-life, is it is not her body. And as such, I am actually on the side of life begins at conception. As soon as one gamete meets another, which we saw, right here. There we go. Right here, fertilization, two become one, makes a zygote. As soon as that happens, it is an entirely different being. And as far as I'm concerned, all arguments stop. I know there are other people who will argue, it's just a cell or just a clump of cells. If you take the morning after pill or whatever it happens to be, what has been lost? And my answer to that is a life. A life has technically been lost. Now, is it a life that realized that it was a life? No. But then again, if we were going to go by that standard, most people don't really develop a sense of self until they're a couple of years old. Then again, some people never do, and those people go into Congress. But at this point, it is an entirely unique individual. It will have its own genetic... It has its own genetic code. It will have its own genetic expressions. This is how you can have children who actually look different than their parents. When we talk about recessive genes, when we talk about dominant genes, you can get different combinations inside of a child than either parent expresses. You can have a parent with brown hair, a parent with blonde hair, and have a child come out with, well, okay, no, not that one. Red hair is recessive. But you can have a parent with red hair, a parent with blonde hair, and have a child come out with brown hair. These things can happen because it is a completely unique genetic expression. And if we take it at that level, then everything else that follows must also be respected. It is an individual person, and yes, I would even go so far as to say, as soon as the conception happens, it is entitled to human rights. And what are those rights? Well, as we discussed last week, when we discussed, who was it? Was it Kant? I forget what. No, it was the second treatise on government. I forgot. I'm so bad at this today. Either way, human rights, life, above all else, life, followed by liberty, property, and the pursuit of happiness. Tux says, oh, at conception, you're more of a hardliner than I am on this. I am at the approximately 3 to 6 week person. Okay, and the reason why most people tend to be at the 3 to 6 weeks is because you don't even know until generally 3 to 6 weeks. Okay? Most people have no idea they're pregnant until at least 3 to 6 weeks afterwards. Which means, if we don't take that approach, if we don't establish that there's a grace period in there some way, then we have by extension made abortion illegal. If we haven't made it illegal in policy, then we have at least made it illegal in practice, because there's no other way, unless you were going to take a pregnancy test every day, and even that would not be fully sufficient. JP says double recessive becomes dominant becomes dominant trait needs to be recessive on both sides, right? Your grammar needs work, but you're kinda right. More to the point, if you have two recessive genes, then there's nothing to get in their way. I mean, think about your genes getting into a line, into a queue, okay? The dominant genes push their way up to the front. Okay? They'll just push the other ones out of the way. They want to be at the front of the line. But if you have two recessive genes, they're not going to try and push each other out of the way. Which means if they're the same gene for, like, say, hair color or eye color, or, you know, something simple like that, if they're different, you've got a 50-50 chance of getting one or the other. If they're the same, you have a 100% chance of getting that one, because there's nothing else to get in the way. And that's really all I want to get in on that one. Genetics is a broad subject, and I could get into things like what do they call Mandela's squares and things like that. I don't want to do that here. It's very complicated. Don't want to get into that discussion yet. If you want to have a further discussion on genetics, I would first have to brush up on it, but we can do that. We can do genetics in a future lecture. I'm not sure if I'm remotely qualified for that, but I can give it my best shot. And so, yeah, that's my take on abortion and where the line needs to be. The unfortunate thing, though, is, like I said, it's not necessarily a matter of whether people are pro-life or not. It's whether or not you are pro-abortion. And the pro-abortion side doesn't care. I have given this argument to pro-abortion people, and they don't care. When they say it's my body and my choice, that is literally the only argument they care about and the only argument they're willing to accept. Because when we talk about things like this, we're talking about hardened opinions, we're talking about faith, we're talking about just people who have their opinions, they're solidified in their opinions, they're not going to change their opinions, not for you, not for me, not for anything. And with that segue, let's get into the next big one. And where was it? No, I want this one, actually. We're going to start talking about Isreal, because that's topical right now. And I'm going to say it right now, I am not doing a history lesson. Okay? I am not doing it. There is roughly 8,000 years of history, starting in the Middle East and going through all of the Abrahamic religions. Nobody agrees on the history, and I'm not even trying. And Tux says, thinking is replaced with slogans. Not going to argue on that one. JP says the real question is, does the word shoot encompass both firing and loosing? And that's not even as contentious as you think it is, because actually, yes, it does. It does actually encompass both of those. To shoot is to hit anything with a projectile. That's simple. Doesn't really matter how you do it. As long as you are hitting something with a projectile, whether that is a stone, an arrow, a bolt, or a bullet, it is shooting. There you go. I know, you thought you were going to derail the entire thing. You're not derailing anything this time. Nice try, though. So, Israel, Palestine, Gaza, all the buzzwords. I've talked a little bit about this in the past because I have brought up the 3 Abrahamic religions in other things before, especially when we've talked about things like the 10 Commandments, which is why I brought it up here. It's stuff that we've already talked about here. But I wanted to start here just because it is familiar territory. We have discussed the 10 Commandments. We have discussed why they're important. We have discussed the deadly sins and why they're important as well. There are reasons for all of these things to exist, and I have done that exhaustively in other lectures. There's some of my better lectures. I recommend going back to them or sharing those with anybody who, could really use them right now. And let's face it, we could all use a little bit more wisdom these days. But I want to start here, because I want to talk about the 3 Abrahamic religions and something they have in common, okay? We're going to get into the differences later on, because the differences are stark. But we're going to do that. Because obviously, as everybody knows, the only way you could not know what is going on is if you literally lived in a cabin in the woods on top of a mountain, which is then surrounded by a valley, which is then surrounded by more mountains, which then has oceans on both sides, to not know that there is a current war in the Middle East between Palestine and Israel. And I say Palestine and Israel because Gaza is basically part of Palestine anyway. Blizz is in the chat. Hello, Blizz. Good to see you here. Oh, I hope everybody's wearing their helmets, because, you're going to need them now more than ever. So strap on. Wow, that's not going to get clipped. Anyway, 10 Commandments. We discussed them when we talked about Christianity. But as it turns out, the 10 Commandments are not just... they're not just exclusive to Christianity. And we can actually find them in everything. So we're actually going to go down here and take a look at them. Just briefly. So, Judaism. Okay, we're going to take a look at these. Judaism, does it actually show them? No, it does not actually show them. It's got them here. Does anybody speak Hebrew? Does anybody read Hebrew? I can't read Hebrew. But, they're there. And I can't actually read that, so we're just going to have to... We're going to have to let that one go. Let's see. If we come down, though, there's Christianity. We've gone through these before. We know mostly what they are. Here we go. Here's something. No, this is nothing. It's also written in Hebrew and written in something else under it that I have no idea. Let's see. Honra autu... This is Latin, isn't it? I'm willing to bet this is Latin. That makes sense. Yo a tu Dios que? I have no idea. Pretty sure it's Latin, though. Latin and Hebrew. But we've been through them before. We know what they are, basically. They are, no other gods before me, no graven images, honor thy mother and father, no killing, no stealing, no envy, things like that. And somewhere down here, there was a really, really nice grid. There it is. Okay. And there is actually 10 Commandments in Islam as well. So this is in the Bible, this is in the Quran, and they do have kind of a not quite a one-for-one, but yeah, close enough. Let's see, Tuck says, hello Blizzard, had to trick YouTube not automatically throwing out an emoji. That's fine, I know, it's hard. JP says, helmets are in the Discord. Yes, helmets are in the Discord. If you don't have a helmet, join the Discord. We have helmets. JP says, Sasuke is going to summon the Necronomicon. No. That's Klaatu Verada. Damn, I always forget the last one. Never mind. Alright, so anyway, 10 Commandments from the Quran to the Bible. So the first one in the Quran says, do not associate others with God. In the Bible it says, do not put other gods before me. Similar. Not exactly the same, but similar. Hey, Flame is in here. I just noticed. Hello, Flame. Good to see you here, too. It's weird. My stream says there's only 3 people watching right now. But there's obviously more than 3 people here, plus I'm here. Come on, YouTube. What's wrong with you? Second commandment, honor your parents. The Bible says, honor thy mother and thy father. Same thing. Third one, though, do not kill your children for fear of poverty. Very specific. The Bible simply says, do not murder. Now, the Bible's actually very specific there when it says, do not murder. It doesn't say necessarily, do not kill. It just says, do not murder. And murder is very specifically. Murder is just killing for the sake of killing. When people ask, it's like, how could the church have, like, what was it, 6 different crusades? I think it was like 6 different crusades where they slaughtered people by the score. Oh crap, there's actual helmet emojis. That's great. Everybody get a helmet. JP, distribute the helmets. Okay, anyway, the Crusades, and by extension, the Jihads, those were killing for a purpose. And thus, they were not murder. Very important distinction that we're going to talk a lot about today. Fourth one, do not come near indecencies openly or secretly. That apparently corresponds with do not covet thy neighbor's wife, do not commit adultery. See. Fifth commandment, do not take life except justly. Again, I said we were going to come back to that. That wasn't this instance, but, you know, there we go. And Tux, that is not a helmet. Report to Petty Officer JP and requisition yourself a proper helmet, soldier. Alright. Sixth commandment. Do not come near the property of the orphan except to enhance it. Which is oddly specific, but sure. Apparently that translates to do not covet his slaves, his animals, or anything of thy neighbor. Seventh one, give full measure and weight with justice. There is no corresponding thing. It also says, however, remember the Sabbath day is also absent in the Quran, but I would argue that's because every day is sacred in Islam. I mean, there are 3 prayers a day, and if you miss any of them, you're in trouble. The 8th commandment, whenever you testify, maintain justice, even regarding your close relative. In other words, do not bear false witness against thy neighbor. 9th, fulfill your covenant with God, or do not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain. 10th one, follow God's path and not any other. Do not make unto thee any graven image of idols, neither kneel before them nor worship them. So we can see there's a lot of overlap here, and there's even more overlap between the Bible and the Torah. Let's see. Flame says 6 probably means that you should not bother poor people unless to make them better, or something. Basically, kinda. JP says, funny, I'm actually a second-class petty officer. Oh, that's right, I forgot. You were actually in the service. Oh, that is actually funny. And the fact that I got it right. Alright, so we can see that there's a lot of overlap between these 3. However, that being said, while there is a lot of overlap, there is one black sheep in the 3 Abrahamic religions. That being Islam. Now, with the whole situation in the Middle East, we know that Hamas in Gaza did several things. Number one, they launched a massive offensive against Israel when it came to rocket fire. Their goal was to overwhelm the Iron Dome defense, and they did it. with one massive strike, they were able to overwhelm the defenses and shell the hell out of Israel. A lot of people died. And those that didn't die, they actually sent people into Israel. Specifically, they used paragliders, which, I mean, everyone's like, oh my god, they were paragliding people in there. My question is, how'd they get them in the air in the first place? Does Gaza have, like, airplanes? Do they have helicopters? You can't just take off from the ground with a paraglider, I don't think. They didn't say they had electric fans. Can you take off from the ground with a paraglider? I'm still wondering how they even got in the air. But anyway, they sent people over the walls into Israel and they started massacring. And I'm not going to mince words here. They massacred. Oh, Tuck says, wait, did rockets actually get through? Haven't heard that one. Oh, no. The Iron Dome is super cool, okay? The Iron Dome is really, really awesome, but the Iron Dome only has an effectiveness of about 80%. Okay, so every time Hamas shells Israel, there are shells that land. The difference is, usually they'll launch anywhere from like 10 to 100 shells. And so when you talk about an 80% effectiveness, you're only talking about like maybe 2 to 20 shells that get through. But they didn't launch 10. They didn't launch 100. They launched 5,000 plus. And when you launch 5,000 of them, 20% of that is 1,000 rockets. Yeah, a lot of rockets got through. And then they landed all of their soldiers inside of Israel, inside the damaged areas, and they started to massacre people. They massacred them. They raped them. They captured them and took them prisoner. And why? Well, like I said, I'm not going to get into a history lesson here. The only history that we need to know about this, two things. Number one is Jerusalem. Okay, the entire reason why we're fighting here in the first place is Jerusalem. Jerusalem is the holy city, or at least one of them. Obviously Mecca is a holy city, but I'm not sure how Mecca and Jerusalem are intertwined. Both of them are holy, but we're fighting over Jerusalem for the most part. That's the first thing you need to know from history. The second thing you need to know is how Israel came to be. And this is actually the reason why they call it stolen land. To make a very, very long and complicated story very, very short, is after World War II, after many, many Jews had been displaced from Europe, many of them needed a place to go, and obviously going back home was not an option for many of them. So through a long process that I don't even know all the details to, with the help of Britain and a few other nations, I don't necessarily know who all the players were, Israel was founded. Now, interestingly enough, because of where it was founded, they needed to work with the surrounding nations in the area. And I forget if it was Saudi Arabia or who it was that Britain was mostly dealing with when they made Israel. But they said we needed a place, or the Jews need a place to go, okay? And so they said we're going to help them settle here, because this was back when Britain was still an empire, and Britain was really good at colonizing places. So they said we're going to make a Jewish colony, okay? And whoever it was, I want to say Saudi Arabia, but I'm not positive on that one, basically said, yeah, we're not on board with that, dog. And Britain said, too bad, we're doing it. And so they started drawing up boundaries. They started drawing up borders. So they drew up Israel in more or less what it looks like currently. And of course, the Islamic nation said absolutely not. And then Britain said, fine, we'll shave off here, here, and here. Okay, it's a little bit smaller. How about that? To which the Islamic nation said absolutely not. And so they kept shaving it away until Israel was literally about 5% the size of what it is now. And they said, all right, how about this? And the other Islamic nations said, I'm sorry, what part of absolutely not did you not understand? At which point Britain said, you know what? I think I understand the problem here. We're going to go back to the original borders, and we just got done blowing the absolute shit out of Germany. If you would like your country to look the same as Germany, keep arguing. And thus Israel was born. Now, I may have made some mistakes in that story. I may have embellished some other things. But by and large, as a summary, that was how Israel came to be. That's where the claim of it being stolen land comes from. Let's see. Tuck says the official story is that Hamas used drones to destroy sensor towers before the rocket attack, then sent paragliders in under the rocket Iron Dome noise. Okay, I hadn't heard that part about them destroying towers. Tux also says to be fair, they were promised a unified Arabian nation for help defeating the Ottoman Empire. Maybe. I'm not sure. Again, I'm not actually a historian. My knowledge of history is cursory at best, because as far as I'm concerned, history is boring as shit. Unfortunately, I am also a full subscriber in the idea that those who do not learn history are doomed to repeat it. So you notice my conundrum here. I really, really hate history, but you can't escape history. Yes, my life is a waking misery. Anyway, though. So that's where Israel came into being. And, of course, literally everybody else in the region was pissed. Because, again, one of these religions is the black sheep. Turns out you can put Christians and Jews in the same area and they'll get along just fine. Okay? The Christians will be pissed at the Jews because they go to temple on the wrong day of the week. And the Jews will be pissed off with the Christians because they love ham sandwiches. That's generally about the worst of it. Because oddly enough, Christians and Jews get along better than Catholics and Protestants. Just the way it is. However, Islam does not get along with anybody. Now, I don't actually know how or why it came to be like this. I don't know. I wasn't there. Neither am I a historian, neither am I a scholar on Islam. All I do know is that for basically its entire existence, Islam has been a faith of war and conquest. This was true way back during the jihads and the crusades. It was true before that. It remained true afterwards, and it remains true today. Islam is a religion of war and conquest. And I know it's going to make some people out there very angry, and I don't care. I'm right. And the reason or I can say that is because I can actually prove it. So before I came on here, I just did a quick search, and really it was a quick search because it did not take me long to pull up. Let's see, which one of these do I want? I think I want this one. Here we go. And so this is, and I'm going to invert this again. There we go. It says, what does Islam teach about violence? And it's kind of small. Let me see if I can make it a little bit bigger. There we go. The fact is that it says it contains at least 109 verses in the Quran that speak of war with the non-believers, usually on the basis of their status as non-Muslims. Some are quite graphic, with commands to chop off the heads and fingers and kill infidels wherever they might be hiding. Muslims who do not join in the fight are called hypocrites and warn that Allah will send them to hell if they do not join the slaughter. This is one of the greatest contentions when we talk about this, because, of course, you are going to have people who are both Muslim and many who are not Muslim who will say that these are simply misinterpretations, and that the Bible is just as violent as the Quran is. And while it is true that there are many passages of violence in the Bible, there are not nearly as many of them. When it says that there are at least 109 verses that speak of war with non-believers, here's where the list starts. And it keeps going and going and going until we get to the notes. There are a lot of them. And this is one of the reasons why, when this kicked off, number one, I was not surprised when Hamas attacked Israel. The fact is that they've never stopped attacking Israel. And this is basically Islam's approach to anyone. This is kind of their approach to everyone, actually. Because, again, it's all about conquest. The idea of any religion, actually, the purpose of any religion is kind of twofold. Number one, the purpose of any religion is to tell you how to live. Which is why I started this off talking about the Ten Commandments. Because the ostensible purpose of all religions is to tell you how to live. That is why there are 10 commandments in the Bible, there are 10 commandments in the Torah, there are 10 commandments in the Quran. I'm not going to stand up here and pretend that all of Islam is simply trash, okay? I'm not saying that you have to take all of Islam and throw it away. I've actually maintained for a long time that Islam is in need of the same thing that Christianity had. See, under Martin Luther, when Martin Luther became disenfranchised and disillusioned with what the church had become, he filed his petition, he nailed it to the door, and it caused the Great Schism, which then split the entire Christian church into two halves. You had the Catholics, and you had the Protestants. And yes, they hated each other. They still hate each other. And they did split a whole lot more after that. But the point was that after that happened, it forced a lot of people to take a look at what the church was doing and what it had become. And it reformed. This is also, coincidentally, where we got the New Testament. Whereas the Old Testament told you what you were how you should live, and what would happen to you if you were to disobey the commandments of God, The New Testament was kind of a more friendly face that said, this is how you should live, and these are the reasons why you should want to live this way. Whereas the Old Testament gave us the stories of Lot and the stories of, is it Jacob and Isaac? Again, not a scholar here. I'm going from memory here, and I've not actually read the entire Bible. I think it was Jacob and Isaac. I could be wrong. Whereas the Old Testament gave us these things, which were all about, the punishment aspects, the New Testament gave us stories like Daniel, where you were told that simply doing and being were good enough. Having faith was enough. Islam never had that. It's a bit like taking, it's not a bit like, it's actually taking an older civilization and then teleporting them to a modern era. If you went back in time, and this is one of the reasons why we talk about, times change. Islam, during its day, back in, pre-BC times, was no different than anybody else. But other cultures have grown, other cultures have evolved, they have modernized, and they have reformed and progressed. The problem with Islam, however, is that it is baked into it. It is categorically impossible for it to progress, because progression is heresy. And so that leads us to where we are. Islam is still barbaric, at least in its interactions with other people. Within Islam, it's better. It's not much better, but it is still technically better. The fact is, Islam has been going for thousands of years. They have got to be doing something right. But their interactions with other religions, with other cultures, are nothing short of barbarism. Which is where we come back to here. Because it does preach violence. Now, I want to say all of this as a foundation. Because when people talk about the fight between Israel and Palestine, between Gaza and Hamas, and even between Hezbollah up in Lebanon and everyone else, there's arguments about stolen land. Well, we just covered that. It's like 75 years ago. Okay? I don't want to talk about it right now. It happened 75 years ago. We cannot change what happened 75 years ago. We cannot change what happened 10 years ago. We can barely change what happened yesterday. What I do care about is I don't necessarily care about what happened before so much as I care about what happens now. This has always been my approach when it comes to these things. I like to look forward and say, the past is history. We can't do anything about it. The future is unwritten. What can we do today to get the future that we want? Now, in the case that we have here, when Hamas asked, what can we do today to create the future we want, today turned out to be firing 5,000 plus rockets and sending in paratroopers. Okay, that was their choice. Regardless of what justification you think they had, regardless of what the history was, that was their choice. And the reason that I bring this up is because of this. See, I hear often, because I follow the news every day, and I have heard, I think, every single argument you can hear about the conflict between Israel and Gaza and Palestine. And one of the things that I think of here, and I actually heard this asked beautifully on Tim Pool, when he asked, if you were to remove the border between Israel and Gaza, and you just said free movement, okay? No more passports, no more checks. Remove the border. Anyone from Gaza can go into Israel. Anyone from Israel can go into Gaza. He asked, what are the Israelis going to do to the civilians in Gaza? The answer to that, of course, is nothing. They're not going to do anything. They're not interested in the people of Gaza. They've never been interested in the people of Gaza. But what about the people from Gaza who are heading into Israel? If you remove the border, say free movement, no checks, no nothing, they're now allowed to go into Israel en masse. What happens? The answer is simple. It's staring us literally right in the face. This is a problem that I have with this entire conflict. Many people are trying to either both sides it and say that there are bad actors on both sides of this conflict and that this is unavoidable, but if we can only just come together, then we can end the conflict. Okay? There's a lot of people that are arguing that. And it's maybe a fair argument to make in some circumstances. I would argue that I would argue that it's definitely not here. I've also heard arguments that the people of Gaza would be justified in whatever they did. Okay, and I'm not going to get involved in that one either. What I would say is that if you went to Gaza, which is a Muslim nation, they are going to have a call to prayer 3 times a day. They're going to have sermons. They're going to have imams preaching on street corners and in mosques. And what is it that they're going to be preaching? Well, in the cathedral, they preach the Bible. If you go to a synagogue, they preach the Torah. If you go to a mosque, they will preach the Quran. And when they preach the Quran, they're preaching this. I went so far as to say over here, or to look this up, and I got an answer from Cora. It says, where does it say in the Quran to kill infidels? And this is where I actually got this, the link to here. They said, most assuredly, it does. The Taqiyya answers given already are without foundation. They're quoting unabrogated tests. Let's see. If the Quran and Hadith are not sufficient, you can look at 14 centuries of killing. Islam didn't spread out from the Arabian Peninsula and cover Morocco to Indonesia with peace and love. You could ask the conservative estimate of 80 million Hindus killed during the conquest of India, or the cultures of North Africa, remember Carthage, utterly destroyed with the spread of Islam. But of course, they're gone. It's not just ancient history, it's happening daily to the Yazidi, the Christian Nigerians, and more by the people following the letter of the law dictated by the Quran. As there are far too many surahs and hadith instructing Muslims to kill unbelievers, here is just a taste, and we're not going to run through all of those because pretty much everything that was in there was also copied over here, or perhaps it was even copied from here. This is the crux of the problem I see in the entire Israel versus Gaza, and pretty much just Israel versus the entire Islamic nation as a whole. Israel is a relatively, or the Israelis are a small people who are by and large limited to a single nation on earth. It's not even a very big one. I think I heard somebody say it's only about the size of New York. I'm not sure. I haven't actually looked at a map lately to compare it to anything, but it's not a very big nation. And the entire Islamic world, by the tenets of their own text, wants it wiped out. And so it's a bit of a juxtaposition. Every single time they say stolen land, okay? Israel is land stolen. We come back to the Quran. Chapter 2, I think it's chapter 2, section 216, I don't know. Fighting is prescribed to you, and ye dislike it. But it is possible that ye dislike a thing which is good for you, and that ye love a thing which is bad for you. But Allah knoweth, and ye know not. Okay? Oh, but the Israelis are being just as bad to them. The Quran 476, those who believe fight in the cause of Allah, and those who disbelieve fight in the cause of Tagut, Satan, or whatever underworld figure. So fight you against the friends of Shaitan, or in other words, Satan. Okay? So for every single instance that they will blame Israel for starting the fight, for continuing the fight, for deserving the fight. There are so many of these passages that are literally telling every single Muslim to destroy them. And not only this, but again, I like to look forward and I say, you know what? I don't know how this whole Israeli conflict is going to turn out. What I do know is this. What if, and just follow me on this one, what if Islam wins, okay? And the nation of Israel is completely wiped off the map, as they say, from the river to the sea. And every single man, woman, and child of Jewish faith and blood is exterminated in the Middle East. Does it stop there? It's an honest question. Does it stop? Would it stop? The answer to this is obviously no. Because the Jews are only their most egregious enemy. It's not enough that they're non-believers, but they actually believe in something that is contrary to them. And so they need to be removed. In fact, I don't even think that Jews would be given the option to convert if they wanted to. People like myself, atheists, would generally be given at least a chance to convert if we wanted to. But for those who belong to other faiths, no, it's done. You don't get another chance, okay? You had your chance, you picked the wrong side. It's over for you. So no, they would not stop there. They would simply pick a new target. Now that Israel was gone, maybe now they have to go find different places where there are Jewish populations. Maybe they look for Jewish centers in places like New York City, which are already on lockdown after the attacks on Israel. In New York City, there are entire parts of the city which have been turned into, well, actually they haven't really been turned into anything. There are some more police there, sure, but the Jewish population in New York City has been told to shelter in your homes. Because the fact is, they can't protect you if you are Jewish and you decide to come outside. No, they would not stop there. And so the problem never was Israel. Okay, it was never Israel. And the problem was never necessarily the Jews. This is one of the things that I've never really understood. And perhaps I'm just either too naive, or maybe I'm, on the other side, too cynical. I've never understood the Jew hatred that goes back through history. Because if you look at Jewish history, it's just a marathon of absolutely getting destroyed. Everywhere they go. I don't understand it. I probably never will. All I do know is that the other people of the world, particularly in Islam, will never stop until there is not a single drop of Jew blood left. And so when it comes to picking sides on this entire engagement, that's kind of where I draw the line. You have a nation who literally has some of the most advanced technology in the world, and they have made one of the best defense systems ever. And they have said, please leave us alone. Because one of the things that we have to realize is that the Iron Dome system uses rockets. It uses rockets to intercept rockets. With a few lines of code and a few flips of the switch, the Iron Dome could be used to attack Gaza. Anything that can be used defensively can be used offensively. And they could, as somebody put it, turn Gaza into a parking lot. And for years, nay decades, they have not done this. They're not interested in it. They're not in general interested in Gaza at all. Or Palestine, or Lebanon, or Syria, or any of them. There is, in fact, one actual aggressive party here. One person or one group who started it. That is indisputable as far as I'm concerned. And I'm not really willing to entertain arguments to the opposite. The only other thing that I really have to talk about on that subject, though, is the idea of civilians. Because we have heard that Israel has been shelling the place and they are slaughtering the civilians in Gaza. And I have two problems with this. One of which is kind of a lesser one, that I do feel bad for, but we'll talk about it. The first of which is this. Hamas is using civilians. We all know that Hamas will build rocket sites on top of hospitals. They will build batteries on top of apartments. They use civilians as a shield. Okay? This is explicitly counter to pretty much any rules of warfare that we have used in history. Going back as far as we could, we did not hide behind civilians. Back in medieval times, it would have been considered dishonorable. And then later on, in modern warfare, we just kind of agreed not to do it. You just shouldn't do it. Not because it's honorable or dishonorable, just because it's not right. But Hamas has a tendency to do this all the time because, well, it works. Of course, it works in the same way as, poisoning somebody's food works before a contest. Yes, it works. Should you do it? Well, maybe. Maybe not. It depends on your principles, or lack thereof. If you're interested in winning, you do it. If you're interested in, a fair contest, if you're interested in, honor and dignity, you don't. Obviously, Hamas, they're interested in winning. That's it. They just want to win. But this is nothing new. Instead, I actually want to talk about the civilians themselves. And part of that is going to relate to this. All of this. Now, I have spoken before about the need for people to leave. I have talked about people who live in cities or states like California or Los Angeles or whatever. And I have said that when it gets bad, you get out. I've talked about other war zones. I've talked about Ukraine. I've talked about places like Bosnia or, whatever wars you can think of. When things get bad, you get out. This is why we have refugees from so many different war-torn nations. When you get bad, you get out. Because if you don't, then you've essentially chosen what you're going to be responsible for, what you're going to be living in. And you don't want to be there. Now, this is a bit of a unique circumstance in that they kind of can't. As I understand it, there are only so many ways in and out of Gaza. There's many ports that go between Israel and Gaza, and obviously all of those are closed right now. So you can't get to Israel. But there's others. In particular, I believe there's a very big port that borders Gaza and Egypt. That port is also closed. And that's actually very interesting because Egypt is largely an Islamic nation. However, when Egypt was asked if they would take Gazan refugees, Egypt said no. Egypt said, we do not owe them anything and we do not want them. And so, when they talk about Gaza being an open-air prison, that's not entirely wrong. The fact is that many of these civilians that are in there are trapped. I wouldn't call it a prison so much because that would imply that somebody is keeping them there. And obviously, Israel is not responsible for Gaza. They are not keeping the people in Gaza unless you count them not opening their own gates to the people that are trying to kill them now. I am not going to go ahead and fault them for opening the gates to people that are going to come in and bomb and massacre more Israeli civilians. But it does beg the question of why Egypt won't take anyone. It says a whole lot about Hamas and the people living in Gaza that Egypt will not open the door to them. I think that maybe Syria also borders them. I'm not positive. But they won't take anyone either. Nobody is willing to take them. Which means that the people of Gaza are at best on their own. And this is where I have a little bit of sympathy. But only a little bit. Because if you know that nobody is going to help you, then that does put you in a position where you're going to have to help yourself. The fact is this. In Gaza, Hamas was elected as the leaders. Now, when they say that Hamas was elected, in no way do I believe that there was a free and fair election in Gaza. What I'm sure happened is most people understood that if Gaza does not win, then Gaza is going to just destroy everything. Tuck says that's all the borders on the Gaza Strip. Gaza also borders the Mediterranean Sea. Interesting. I didn't know they had sea. Very interesting. I should look at a map at some point just so I have a better context of what this area looks like, because I'm not even sure if I'm picturing it right in my head. Anyway, regardless. We know that Hamas took control over the Gaza Strip. The problem here, as I see it, and it's a nasty problem to have. I do not envy them. I feel bad for the people living there. But if there is going to be any kind of change, it is going to have to come from within. If Hamas is the group leading the attacks on Israel, if Hamas is the one who has declared themselves to be at war, or if they have declared jihad against Israel, it is on the people of Gaza to stop it. Now, what does that mean? Am I saying that they need to rise up and have a rebellion against Hamas? Yeah, I am. The unfortunate thing is that in order for this to stop, you would probably have to put a gun into the hands of every single man, woman, and child and take out every single member of Hamas. And then you might be able to seek a ceasefire and maybe even build something from there. But you're not going to get that kind of result from outside. Nobody from Egypt is going to help. Nobody from Lebanon is going to help. Nobody from Syria is going to help. Nobody from the UAE, nobody from Saudi Arabia, nobody from Turkey. No one is going to help Gaza. No one is going to make any changes there. And so it's going to happen from the inside. Now, does that mean that they're going to be successful? I don't know. They might not be. Does it mean a lot of people are going to die? Oh, yes, a lot of people are going to die. Is that sad? Yeah, it is. Is there any other way out of this, though? No. Because much as I said when I was talking about the abortion debate and the fact that people are solidified in their positions, you are never, ever going to find a member of Hamas who is going to change their mind on what they're doing. And it's because you had to make up your mind before you joined Hamas. Nobody's joining Hamas saying, I don't know much about them, but I would like to learn more. Perhaps I could join up with you and learn a little bit. No, they're not doing that. Everybody knows what's going on. You made up your mind before that happened. Until Hamas is gone, there can be no progress. And until Hamas is gone, and so long as Hamas is making war upon Israel, it's going to continue. Israel is going to continue to send ground troops in there. They're sending ground troops in right now. They're going to continue shelling buildings where every time they find so much as a single mortar, it will continue until Hamas is gone. And then once Hamas is gone, then we can look for a more peaceful coexistence. But it's been said before, and I will repeat it now as I finish up this entire lecture. You cannot seek peace, or you cannot seek compromise with somebody who wants your destruction. And we can all think back to, say, when we were in school and there was a bully who was picking on you, and the bully says, I'm going to beat you up during recess, okay? Well, the bully wants to beat you up. And the bully is going to beat you up pretty much regardless of what you say. You're not going to talk your way out of a fight with the bully. So you're going to have to find a way outside of that. Either the bully's going to have to change their mind, or you're going to have to get a teacher to step in or something like that. And unfortunately, in the Israel-Palestine conflict, there are no teachers to call. Okay? There's no other adults in the room. So Israel is going to have to deal with Hamas until there is no Hamas. And then afterwards, the civilians that are left in Gaza can make a new start. Also, I see a fellow meow in the chat. Meow meow. And Tuck says the son of Hamas leader / founder Mossab Yosef, I believe, did convert to Christianity. He is no longer allowed in Palestine and lives in the U.S. in a secret location. I mean, maybe. I have no idea. However, I mean, just illustrates my point. The fact is, if he converted to Christianity, and let's see if I can get my terminology correct here, that would make him an apostate. And apostates, like all other heretics, get death in Islam. And so, like I said, just further illustrating my point there. No, the unfortunate thing is that so long as Hamas is there, there is no peace. And unfortunately, even if we get rid of Hamas, it's not going to be the end. There's still Hezbollah up in Lebanon, I know that much. And I do believe that Al-Qaeda said that they were throwing in their support behind Hamas. There may even be Al-Qaeda or Taliban, maybe even Taliban, who are in Gaza right now helping. We do know that some of the weapons from Afghanistan have found their way into Gaza. They're using some of them. And so, if Hamas is wiped out, there will be another one. And really, the entire problem here comes down not to Israel, not to Hamas. The problem itself is Islam. And until Islam reforms itself, into something new, something better, something more, as I hate to say it, progressive. As poisoned as that word is, this is not going to end. So I will not blame Israel for anything they're doing. Israel as a nation and the Jews as a people have shown tremendous reservation when it comes to dealing with pretty much the entire Middle East. Because the entire Middle East would like to see them as nothing more than scorched earth. And so long as they keep attacking Israel, Israel is unfortunately justified in doing pretty much anything they want to do. If the rest of the Middle East would simply stop attacking them, the conflict would be over. But the Middle East cannot stop attacking them because it is literally preached to them 3 times a day. And that's pretty much all the evidence you need right there. So, that's my stance on the whole Israeli-Palestine thing. That's a rather long subject to go over, but there was a lot to cover there. With that, however, I do think I'm going to go ahead and wrap things up. That was 3 topics. That was a rather long stream in general. I guess a good thing I didn't get any of the suggestions, because otherwise it could have gone on for another hour or so. Let's see. Malachi says, yes, apostasy is frowned upon. Tuck says, the son of Hamas is advising Israel to use gas to clear Hamas tunnels. I'm not sure how I feel about that one. It would be effective. And, you know, on a certain level, yeah, do what you gotta do. I don't know. I wouldn't want to do it if I didn't have to. But then again, that's kind of the summary of the entire Israel-Gaza war right now. I wouldn't want to if I didn't have to. But, unfortunately, Israel has to. So, with that being said, I think I'm going to go ahead and wrap things up here. We do still have the tabletop stream that's coming tomorrow. We're going to try and finish up what we started last week. This time with less story time. I made a big mistake last week with too much story time, so we'll have to kind of dial that back a little bit. We are still trying to set up the actual game. If you would like to do that, join the Discord. So you can throw in your lot there. I've got 2 people so far written down. But obviously we need more than that if we're going to play a game, and I'll need a larger pool of people just to find, you know, overlapping time slots. Malachi says, I'll shut up this week some more. No, don't bother doing that. You don't need to shut up. Trust me, I just need to be more responsible for me. It's that whole personal responsibility thing that I keep talking about. I'm not responsible for the things that you say, and you're not responsible for me screwing off when I should be talking about a subject. See? There you go. Personal responsibility in action. So, if you want to join us for that, I will be glad to see you. If you're not interested in that, then I guess I will see you next week for whatever the lecture happens to be. I have no idea. This was kind of something I just pulled out because I didn't really have anything else prepared. If you would like to leave suggestions for topics, however, you can do that either in the chat right now, in the comments on the stream afterwards, or if you join the Discord, you can throw me ideas there. Otherwise, though, if you just want to be here for it, then subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon. That way you get notified when it comes out. If you know somebody else who also might enjoy this, and because YouTube is absolutely not going to share these lectures, you're going to have to share it out for them. So just throw it at people. Like, get a 3D printer and actually print out the link and then just throw it at people. Actually, what if you could do that? That'd be fun. Oh, what if you could do that and just, like, leave it places? And then people could just pick it up. It's like, huh, I wonder what this is. Go home, type it in. There's Shadowcat. That'd be fun. Otherwise, though, if you enjoy me and you dislike being around me and listening to me ramble on like this, leave a like on the video, leave comments down below, whatever you want to do. It's all good. Otherwise, I will see you tomorrow, next week, later on the week. I don't know. I will see you later. And until then, take care.